£1 billion. We've spent £1 billion and yet we are still talking about projects and potential while Arsenal and Man City fight it out for the title. But what if I told you about the team that we could have built for the exact same money? Would we have won the league by now? Today, I'm building a Chelsea squad that is fit for purpose. A Chelsea what-if squad. And trust me, when you see the striker that we could have signed, you're going to feel sick. Welcome back to From the Shed and welcome back to the channel. If you're new, as always, hit that subscribe button, like this video. Chelsea's what-if squad, the squad that we could potentially have if we spent the money, the 1 billion, the 1.7, the 2 billion, let's call it 2. Let's just round it off to a nice figure. The £2 billion that we could have spent. We're going to get into every single position on the pitch. The 11 players that we should have in the squad, the Champions League potential winning squad, or even the Premier League winning squad, the Chelsea squad that Todd Boehly, BlueCo, Gvardiol, Paul Winstanley, Lawrence Stewart, all of them have failed us. Every single one of them have failed us. And we're going to get into it straight away. Now, up first, we're going to start actually something a bit different. We're going to start with the manager, because if you remember when BlueCo took over in that May of 2022-23 season, you'll recall that we had interviews, an interview selection process of a number of key managers, with obviously Thomas Tuchel departing. But the key one, the top man that was at the top of that list, and the man that we potentially should have gone for, was Julian Nagelsmann. Now, Julian Nagelsmann, again, we tried to get him April 2023. He was meant to be the overwhelming favourite to replace Graham Potter, if you remember. And again, negotiations broke down because Nagelsmann wanted control, total control of transfers, and felt the sporting directors, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, were conducting a casting call process rather than treating him as a top target. And that was one of the first red flags that we should have had as Chelsea fans, to see that these owners and sporting directors were not ready to lead this club back to the glory days under Roman Abramovich. Now, of course, when Nagelsmann decided to withdraw his application for the interview selection process, we ended up with Maurizio Pochettino at that time as our head coach. But we could have had Julian Nagelsmann as the head coach at Chelsea. Now, let me know, first of all, in your comment section, do you think Nagelsmann would be able to achieve something at Chelsea? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. And now let's move to the right back position. Now, of course, this is a position in our team. We've got Reece James there already. So, look, I mean, we always wanted to bring in another sort of, I don't want to say a world class, but another good level of right back defender. Now, the key one, the big one that I feel like we missed out on, was Jules Kounde. Now, Jules Kounde was linked to us in the summer of 2022, the longest saga of the Boehly era. That tells you a lot about how much we wanted this player. Now, when we tried to sign Jules Kounde, we had a 55 million deal agreed with Sevilla. Now, if you remember, the deal was done. I remember doing a video about this. The deal was actually done for Jules Kounde. He was almost theoretically a Chelsea player. The 55 million was agreed. Personal terms were agreed. It should have just been a smooth sailing as you go on to do in these transfer windows. You just get the deal done. He gets on the jet plane. He comes over, does his medical, Bob's your uncle. But by the time that Tuchel had actually given the green light to get this deal done, this is one of the very early deals we tried to get done. By the time that Thomas Tuchel had given his assurances that he wanted the defender, Barcelona came swooping in. And Jules Kounde, as you can see now, if you watch Barcelona games, is a Barcelona player. Now, we did have, obviously, the buyback clause in Tino Livramento. If you remember back in 22 as well, we could have got Tino Livramento, but he went to Newcastle and he's doing okay there, I'd say. I think he's doing all right. But we ended up sticking with Malo Gusto and Reece James. Now, it hasn't really affected us too much in the right-back department. And, of course, we've got young Josh Achiampong coming through as well. But having someone like Jules Kounde, it gives you the option to rest someone like Reece James. Would you have had competition for the two? Maybe. But I think Jules Kounde would have been a brilliant addition. Yes, he's got a wild streak in him. He gets sent off quite a lot. He's got a bad disciplinary record as well, on and off the field. But I think with Reece James, the way that he was at that time as well, plagued with injuries, for me, it would have made sense to have Jules Kounde in the team. Now, let's move over to the centre-back roles, because we were linked with a lot of centre-backs in the last couple of years. Now, of course, we have to look at the first one, Matthijs de Ligt, Now, in the summer of 2022, he was the first major defensive target after Antonio Rudiger left the club. Now, with Antonio Rudiger leaving, we needed someone who was going to be experienced, who had the level of understanding of how you need to play at the top level in the Champions League, trying to win major trophies. And De Ligt's name was one of the top targets under the BlueCo era. Now, this is a bit of a slight different one because Chelsea were actually willing to pay the fee for Matthias De Ligt. Now, De Ligt raised massive concerns about the project after speaking with the sporting directors, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart. He didn't feel like this was actually viable for him to move there. Now, he eventually went on to choose Bayern Munich in that summer, and then later on to Manchester United because they offered Champions League guarantees. Now, that's one thing that at the time, if you remember, even though we were in the Champions League, if you remember back to Thomas Tuchel that summer, with the game that he ended up ultimately losing a final Champions League game before he leaving the club. But we could have got Matthias De Ligt at the club. Now, that is crazy for me to think that we could have got De Ligt, who didn't have the best of times at Manchester United, but as a top defender nonetheless. And I think he would have been brilliant for us. Now, we could have had another player that we could have signed in a centre-back and even in a left-back capacity was Gvardiol, who eventually went on to Manchester City. But we did put a 77 million bid in for him. It was rejected by RB Leipzig. And then we ended up buying Badiashile and Axel Disasi from Monaco, which turned out to be an absolute disaster of two signings. And that left the door open for Manchester City to end up signing Gvardiol. So I think, again, the sporting directors, BlueCo, Barley, Todd Boehly, both fumbled the bag on that deal. And they should have got that deal done over the line because that's two now. De Ligt and Gvardiol. And we can add a third one to that name. We can add a third name to that list, Castello Luqueba, because he was another player that we were heavily linked with in the summer of 2023 because the Chelsea scouts loved him at Lyon as a long-term successor to Thiago Silva. However, the club decided to trust Levi Colwill as the left-footed centre-back, and they also signed Axel Disasi for experience instead. And Luqueba went to Leipzig, and his valuation since then has skyrocketed. So again, another poor signing or potential signing for Chelsea as we fumbled. So far we fumbled. And I haven't even gotten to the goalkeeper. We forgot the goalkeeper, but we could have signed Mike Mignon. You all know that already. We could have signed Mike Mignon, but we've fumbled Jules Kounde, Tino Livramento in the buyback clause. We've fumbled Matthias De Ligt, Gvardiol, and now we've got Luqueba also in that bag of possible signings for Chelsea under BlueCo. Now I'm going to add another one. We're going to add another one because this one I feel like is a big one. This is a big one. Now, we were linked with 2024. We were linked with Ricardo Calafiori. I feel like that one needs a moment of silence because that one, Chelsea fans, let me know in the chat. I feel like this was a big one. Now, obviously, Ricardo Calafiori on the cusp of potentially winning the Premier League and even possibly a Champions League. Look, we've got Marco Correa. We know that. Marco Correa for us he's a brilliant, brilliant left back. We know that. We don't even need to have the conversation. We just know he's a good left back. But again, very much like the right-hand side, you do need competition and like-for-like quality. Like-for-like quality. And I feel like with Calafiori, who we tried to sign, now, according to reports, we were heavily linked with him. Maresca wanted a defender who could invert. Ultimately, the club decided to not pay the price tag. They felt that the £42 million was a price tag that was too high for Calafiori. And of course, at the time, if you remember back then, we had Levi Colwill, Marco Correa, and Renato Vega in that position already. So it wasn't like we were screaming out for left backs. But when you look at what Calafiori is doing this season, and even last season, when you think about what he's been doing this season for Arsenal, you have to ask yourself the question, can you imagine having a super elite defensive line with Jules Kounde, Reece James, De Ligt, Gvardiol, Luqueba? We can even add Mark Guehi into that as well. Forgot about Mark Guehi. But you could also have Correa. You could have Calafiori added into that list of top defensive lines with Mike Mignon in there as well. I'm going to show you the full list of lineups at the end. But let's move on. Let's move on because we've got this one. I feel like stings. Now, I'll be honest. I didn't want this deal to happen at the time. I did not want this deal to happen, but I tell you for something, I nearly knocked the mic over him that mad. This is a signing that when you look back on it, we fumbled, absolutely fumbled. And I'm talking about Declan Rice. Declan Rice, the summer of 2023, the priority target for years and years and years. And I don't mean 2 or 3 or 6 or... I'm talking years of priority target was Declan Rice. Now, simply, to put it into simple terms, the board did not think £100 million was worth it for Declan Rice. Now, I've got to ask you guys in the chat, put your comments below. Was the board right into think that Declan Rice is not worth £100 million? Or is he showing that he is worth £100 million? He's been tipped to be in the conversation as the Ballon d'Or winner if he goes on to win the Premier League and potentially the Champions League. Is he one of the best midfielders in the world? Did we miss out on Declan Rice? I need to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Now, Declan Rice should have signed for Chelsea. Now, of course, look, not all is lost because the board, although they didn't believe in Declan Rice for £100 million, now the club did go on to sign Moises Caicedo. Again, Rice also preferred Arsenal because they were in the Champions League at the time. And of course, Chelsea, we just finished 12th. We weren't looking good. It wasn't looking good for us at the time. But we also could have signed Edson Alvarez. That's another shout out we need to bring out. He went at West Ham. We bid £43 million on deadline day of 2022 for Edson Alvarez. Ajax rejected it. He even refused to train, if you remember. We did a video on that as well. He refused to train for Ajax because he wanted the move to the Premier League. He ultimately ended up at West Ham United. But again, another player that you have to question, would he have fit into the team? Would it give us more options? Would it have been a money well spent if we'd got Edson Alvarez? And more importantly, had we got Declan Rice over the line, would it have made things completely different for our midfield? And would we be talking about the Premier League title chasing Chelsea instead of the top 4 potential, maybe an FA Cup Chelsea? Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, 2 more. We got 2 more midfielders that we potentially could have signed. We could have signed. The first one, Manuel Ugarte, who ended up at Manchester United. Now, in the summer of 2023, it was reported as a done deal by the Portuguese press. We had agreed personal terms. And on the 11th hour, they'd offered PSG swooped in and offered double the wages that Chelsea put on the table. Chelsea pulled out the deal to protect their wage structure, refusing to be held at ransom. Now, we were ready to play the release clause in 2023 for Gabri Veiga. If you remember him, is another player. But he chose not to. He wanted the massive deal in Saudi Arabia. 2 midfielders, I feel like we could have potentially had some good cohesion within our squad. I reckon we would, if we got both of those deals done over the line, or even a Declan Rice and Ugarte. Now, I'm not saying, before anyone gets in the chat and starts assassinating me, that Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez and Andre Santos are not good midfielders. But I'm just thinking off the back of, we've got Lavia, who hasn't really played much football. Dario Azugo, who hasn't really played much football. Then I'm thinking about some of the midfielders that we've allowed to come into the club since then and moved on, who've never really kicked on and got first team regular football. So I'm thinking, would it have been better spent trying to go and get Ugarte, going to try and get Veiga or Edson Alvarez, one of those players that, yes, you're not spending your money on 3 or 4 players and young players, but you're going to just buy yourself that one player that you can bring into the team, take out of the team, switch and swap and play around with Moises Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez. You've got options for the first team, rather than options with players out on loan or players that are coming in, not getting a sniff at first team, and then they're getting sold on for profit. So that's my question. I'm not saying that the midfield we've got is poor by any stretch of the imagination, but you do have to ask yourself the question, is it useful to spread our money across multiple players, or just go and buy that one player that you might need to just drop into the midfield so you can give Caicedo or an Enzo Fernandez a little rest from time to time? That's all I'm saying. Now let's move into the attacking midfielder roles, because this first one burns. This first one burns because it wasn't one summer. It was 2 summers that we should have got Michael Olise. Michael Olise, we triggered his £35 million release clause, but apparently we did it improperly. We didn't do it in the correct way, the correct channels, which then led to Crystal Palace threatening lawsuits for tapping up Michael Olise, and we backed off in embarrassment, which is, of course, the typical Paul Winstanley, Lawrence Stewart, BlueCo way of doing things. They just don't have a clue what they're doing. Now, the other time was 2024 when we did have permission to talk to Michael Olise, but the board refused to make him the highest earner at the club, which meant that Bayern Munich could come in and swoop another transfer target for Chelsea right under our nose. And now if you look at him at Bayern Munich, he's actually playing really good football. So again, I have to ask the question, even with the Champions League football that was on offer at the time at Bayern Munich, should Chelsea have done a little bit more, especially when we tried to get him just a summer before in the 2023 season for Michael Olise? And think about the players now that we've got in those positions before you answer that question in the comment section. Think about who we've got playing on the left and right hand side currently as it stands at the moment. Would Michael Olise, would he have changed our attacking winger options? Let me know what you think in the comment section. Now, we could have also signed Mohamed Kudus. Now, if you remember, Kudus was trying to get signed to us at Chelsea in the summer of 2023, and we were close to signing him. But again, it stalled because we tried to focus, if you remember, on the Moises Caicedo deal that same summer. We were trying to throw money around and get all these deals done. And one of the ones that we dropped and fumbled, and I'm going to be honest about this one. I actually feel like this is a deal that, again, doesn't really impact, especially when you see him now. You look at Kudus now, it doesn't really make me question whether they should have signed him or not, because I actually don't think we should have signed Mohamed Kudus. But he was another target that we definitely wanted. And again, West Ham came in and signed him for £38 million. But I'm going to ask, does it really make a difference for us in terms of what we needed at that time? I don't think it does. And I think the bigger target at that point for me would have been Michael Olise, who we should have tried to sign in that summer window. Now, on the left side, if you want to talk about as a sort of attacking midfielder, again, Nico Williams at Atletico Bilbao. Now, he was the number one target. The transfer fee was only a 49 million release clause. Okay, that wasn't the issue. It was his wages. He reportedly wanted 200 to 250 pounds a week at Chelsea. And Chelsea's new incentive sort of wage structure meant that was never going to be possible. So again, you have to ask the question, as much as we need the players, is it a case that we need to start stretching out of this wage structure to sign some of the best players? And I'm not talking Nico Williams, but I'm talking top quality players. Are we going to miss out on key players if we don't change our incentive-based wage structure and we end up losing out on transfer targets because other clubs in and around us are going to pay more money per week to some of these players? So that's my worry. I'm not saying that we should have done that for Williams, but definitely 100%, I think we need to consider how we do this wage structure. Are there exemptions for certain players? Because if we don't get those certain players across the line, and we've missed out on many targets before as I'm just going through this list, but if we don't get these targets over the line, are we in trouble of missing out and strengthening our rivals while we decline and regress? And maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe this is where I'll keep going back to this project of we're a buy to sell club now. We're not here to try and build Chelsea Football Club as it is right now. Another player that we missed out on was Rafael Leao, who again, summer 2022, Todd Boehly tried to negotiate a swap deal, including Christian Pulisic and Hakim Ziyech. At the time, remember, if both of those players wanted out of the club, neither of them were in favour of the manager or even the club at the time. And AC Milan pointed to his 150 million release clause and told us to pay up or go away. And that's exactly what we did. We sold that 150 million, we packed our bags, we jetted back over to England, and we never heard of the deal again. But again, I have to ask the question. Look at the wingers, look at Garnacho, look at Gittins. Would Rafael, would he be better than those two? Combined of what we spent on the wingers that we spent, would it have made sense to just bring in Leao anyway, because we know what he's capable of? And now we're stuck with Garnacho and Jamie Gittins when we could have had Rafael Leao on that left-hand side. I got to stress that one, because that, for me, I'm not a big fan of Leao. But I'll tell you something, if you push Garnacho and Gittins together and you had one player, Leao's still winning. He's that good. He's much better than what we've got currently at the team. So, yeah, strange. The next one, the next target, and this one I remember very clearly actually, is Anthony Gordon. Think back, it's summer 2022. Chelsea bid 40 to 45 million when he was at Everton. And I'll be honest. I remember a lot of Chelsea fans thinking 45 million for Anthony Gordon. If you remember, back then, the Chelsea owners were very, very connected. They're not now, but they were very connected to the fan base. And if you remember, there's a lot of negative noise coming from the fan base about being overpriced, not good enough to play for Chelsea. And actually, the owners, let's credit them for this one. They actually listened to us, because I don't think Anthony Gordon is good enough for Chelsea Football Club. And the owners backed out the deal purely because the Chelsea fans said he isn't good enough. And they didn't want to make a massive mistake very early on at their time as the club's owners. Anthony Gordon isn't signed by Chelsea. He ends up at Newcastle, which I think he's having a really poor season, if we're going to be honest. But it's another deal that we could have had, another deal. Now, the other one that really irks me, really gets me, and this one we should have got done, because Todd Boehly was out in Barcelona trying to get this deal done. Rafinha. Summer 2022 again. We had a bid accepted by Leeds, if you remember, 55 million. But Rafinha ghosted Chelsea, telling his agent, if you remember, Deco at the time, to stall until Barcelona could find the money to buy him. How embarrassing. At the time, Leeds were struggling. But he's Brazilian. You can't blame him. He wants the sort of Spanish life. He's a South American player. Of course, he's going to join them. But I remember Todd Boehly going out. If you remember, he's just here for lunch or something. Isn't that what he said? I remember this deal because Todd Boehly was flying here, there, and everywhere. The private jet was jetting everywhere. And we still never got the deal done over the line. And that, for me, is a massive worry, massive concern, if I'm being honest. And the final one, I'm sure you can guess which this player is. The final one, the striker that we missed out on, is Victor Osimhen. Now, think back to 2024, this has to be one of the most embarrassing deadline days in recent Chelsea history. Chelsea refused to pay his release clause and offered a loan deal with a lower salary than he was on at Napoli. Osimhen felt disrespected and rejected it. And again, we just washed our hands. We backed down. We said, this is the wage structure. If you don't want to fall in line, you're going to have to find another club. And it's exactly what Osimhen's done. Now, I have to be honest, we had other options there. We had a Meridian as well, and Benjamin Sesko, who we could have also signed for, I think it was around 35 to 40 million pounds in both 2023 and 2024. But we've got to talk about some of the other players, because, I mean, look, we could have got Tyler Adams, if you remember. We activated his release clause. Bad signing, bad negotiations, again, by the ownership. Again, Jean Duran. And who can forget the link with Cristiano Ronaldo? A lot of people say this was the tipping point for Thomas Tuchel. Todd Boehly wanted a name to come through the door that was a superstar, mega money, won it all, won everything. Cristiano Ronaldo. Now you have to wonder what our team would look like with even now actually, with Cristiano Ronaldo at the forefront of our attacking line, options off the bench. Would it have worked? Would it have worked? I need to know what you guys think in the comment section. Can you recall? Take yourself back. Summer 2022, Todd Boehly wanted him as the face of the new era, and Thomas Tuchel refused to have Cristiano Ronaldo at Chelsea Football Club. I need to hear your guys' thoughts. Was that the biggest mistake under this BlueCo era, not signing Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the world's best footballers of all time, at Chelsea Football Club? I need to hear what you guys think in the comment section. But let's put together the 11. Let's see what it looks like. So as you can see, this is the lineup that we could potentially have as Chelsea Football Club. Please, in the comment section, let me know what you think. This is Mike Mignon, Jules Kounde, Ligt, Gvardiol, Calafiori, Declan Rice, Ugarte, Leao, Williams, Olise, and Osimhen. Now, of course, you could throw in other players that we could have signed in and amongst this team. We could do this 3-4 times over. And also you have to factor in, we've got players already, the likes of Reece James in this team, without even putting those into the lineup. But this is the potential signings that we could have had at the club. I need to know what you guys think. Would it strengthen us? Is this a team that you would be willing to put out to try and compete for the Premier League or even the Champions League? I need to know your thoughts in the comment section below. But just look at the squad. look at the lineup, and just think about the potential targets that we've missed out on. Mismanagement, sporting directors. Yeah, you've got a lot to answer for. You've got a lot to answer for. And there's so many people now that are waking up to what a lot of Chelsea fans have been saying over the years about this sporting directors, about this ownership. And just look at some of the names on there. Just look at some of the names on the list. They should be P45 tonight just for this lineup. It's embarrassing. It's an absolute embarrassment. All I'm going to ask Chelsea fans, I want one favor from you, one favor, and that's one favor only. In the comment section, please. In fact, I lied. I want two. I want two favors. The first one, I need you to put the biggest Chelsea target failure under the BlueCo era in the comment section right now. And second of all, I need you to subscribe if you haven't also done this already. Subscribe and like the video before you leave. We're going to have some more content later on this week. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and we'll be back soon.